We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, our virtual series featuring senior Army leaders providing important updates on key defense topics. Our host today is AUSA's Vice President for NCO and Soldier Programs and the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Association of United States Army's Noon Report. We're very glad you've joined us today, and we appreciate your continued support for our programs and events. I'd like to give a brief introduction of our special guest today, Command Sergeant Major Andrew Lombardo. He assumed duties as the 14th Command Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve in April of this year. As the Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve, Command Sergeant Major Lombardo is the Senior Enlisted Advisor of the Chief of Staff of the Reserves on all enlisted matters. He enlisted in the United States Army in 1985, completing a 2-year tour with the United States Military Academy Military Police Company at West Point, before leaving active duty to serve in the Army Reserves. Prior to his current assignment, Command Sergeant Major Lombardo served as Command Sergeant Major of the 200th Military Police Command. He holds a he holds a Master of Science degree in Administration of Justice from the University of Louisville, and in his civilian career is a police executive who holds the rank of Deputy Inspector with the New York City Police Department. For more details on his many accomplishments and decorations, you can access Command Sergeant Major Lombardo's full bio in the handout tab on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Just as a reminder, if you have questions for Command Sergeant Major Lombardo today during this noon report, please use the Q&A tab and post your questions in the box and at the lower right-hand side of the screen. We will do our best to get to as many questions as we can. This is Command Sergeant Major Lombardo's first public appearance of this kind, so we are going to take a little bit of time to get to know Sergeant Major Lombardo, and then we'll get to questions about the incredible mission he has leading the phenomenal United States Army Reserve. Sergeant Major Lombardo, welcome, and thanks for joining us today at the Noon Report.
Thank you, SMA, and thank you, General Retired Ham. It's my absolute pleasure, and I'm very thankful for you bringing me up from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to the warm weather up in Arlington, Virginia. It's my absolute pleasure to be here and highlight America's Army Reserve.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major, for taking the time. I know you and the Chief of the Reserve are very busy, and we appreciate you taking a little bit of your time to talk to our audience today. Sergeant Major, I'd like to start just as I did with John Sampa last week, United States Army National Guard Sergeant Major, and support our Sergeant Major of the Army's initiative, This Is My Squad. You know, SMA Grinstead has said it's important to get to know your people and know your soldiers. So could you do that for our audience today, Sergeant Major? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe share your story, and why did you join the Army?
Yeah, 100%. So first, let me say it's not just SMA Grinstead's This Is My Squad. I'm completely united with SMA Grinstead in operationalizing This Is My Squad in the Army Reserve. You know, I think back to and recollect to when I was a soldier in the regular Army at West Point, and look to my squad leader and my team leader, Corporal Slaughter and Sergeant Allen. Now, Sergeant Allen wasn't just my squad leader, all right? He was my mentor. He trained me. He asked me about my goals, my finances, what I wanted to accomplish in my military career. And it didn't just stop there. He invited the members of his squad to his house on the weekends for picnics. We became very close. He mentored me on patrol and showed me how to be a military police officer. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I was today. All right. I became so close with Sergeant Allen that I had the honor of him asking me to be the godfather of his daughter. And it's very powerful. And what this really represents is the squad leader as the most influential leader in a soldier's life. And if we want to make systematic change in the Army, we have to trust them and empower that squad leader. So, you know, with that, we'll talk about me. And to coin a phrase, I'm a product of the best that the Army has to offer. So I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth like many of the soldiers out there. I was brought up in New York, and I was brought up tough. I had two parents, two sets of parents. One that brought me to this country and one that raised me. I'm adopted, and my family immigrated to the United States in 1967. And they came by boat in the SS Constitution, and I was born en route to the United States. My parents settled in New York and moved out to Brooklyn. In 1967, Brooklyn was a lot different than it is today. There were some tough times. My parents didn't speak English. They had a hard time finding work. And at 3 years old, they had to make a tough decision in order to give me opportunity. And they went to their church. They placed me in foster care. And I was taken in by a family out in Long Island, New York, who was also a working class family. I was raised as a foster child until I was 13 years old, and at which point my foster family and my natural parents thought it best I be adopted in order to have a better opportunity. As I grew closer to graduating high school, I've always wanted to give back to the country that gave me so much. I always considered military service, and military service was frowned upon in the area where I came from. And they thought that you would go into the military because you couldn't succeed in a civilian job. But nevertheless, I went into that Army recruiter. And I wanted to fly helicopters. I was stoked about that. And that Army recruiter said, yes, you can do it. You passed the FAST test. However, it's a 6-year enlistment. And right away, my New York spidey senses went up. And I'm like, 6 years? That sounds more like a prison sentence. What else do you got for me? So we went around through a couple of the occupational specialties. He finally came down to a military police officer. And this was the military police officer with the white cap, with the canine, and with the brassard. And I'm like, all right. He said, it was 2 years. I'm like, I could do that. Send me. So my parents signed the contract for me at 17 years old. And before I knew it, I was on a plane to Fort McClellan, Alabama for one station unit training. I'm the only member of my family that has served in the United States Army. So what did I experience? I experienced what you see on TV, the shock of the drill sergeants and the shock and awe surrounded me. But I also experienced something else. And after the first several weeks, when I became used to my environment, I realized that I had to apply a lot of math that I learned in high school, which was very surprising to me. I had to do that in order to navigate, in order to reconstruct accident scenes. I learned about teamwork, having a battle buddy, being part of that team. I learned about success when I was able to qualify as expert with my M16 rifle. I learned about the diversity of the force, which was much like what the diversity of my community looked like. And I was very comfortable in that. What I really learned is that America's armed services consist of the finest sons and daughters that America has to offer. So I was hooked. I was very, very proud. So what I really took away from this whole thing is the Army is the great equalizer. And you can come from hard knocks and you can have the opportunity necessary and you could wind up being the 14th Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve. And I'm very proud to represent my component as its senior enlisted senior enlisted advisor. So that's where I come from.
Well, Sergeant Major, thanks for sharing that incredibly powerful story, which is attributed why it's so important to know your soldiers and hear their story and where they came from and how they grew up. And it's a great example of the American dream, Sergeant Major. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now, if you don't mind, Sergeant Major, I'd like to dig a little bit more. And I read in your bio that you also serve in another calling, the New York City's finest. How did that come about, Sergeant Major? Now, how did you become an MP in the United States Army and then become part of the New York City Police Force?
Sure, absolutely. Look, one of the NYPD, New York's finest, the largest police department in America. I'm a proud member of it. So after serving 2 years, and I went all the way from Fort McClellan, Alabama, all the way back home to the United States Army Military Academy, or the United States Military Academy at West Point, where I served as a road MP for 2 years, as well as a traffic investigator. So at the end of my 2-year enlistment, I had to make a choice. Was I going to re-enlist or was I going to go back home? And I always wanted to give back to my community as well. I always wanted to be a police officer, and specifically in New York City. And I thought it was a binary choice. So as anybody transitioning from active duty, I had to speak to a transition representative. And it was there I learned, you know what? I didn't have to give up everything that I've accomplished through my military career. I wanted to wear the uniform. So he introduced me to the Army Reserve, and I said, you know what? I'd like to get that, continue with my retirement benefits. I'd like to continue the insurance. I'd like to continue the camaraderie that I had when I was at West Point. So I chose to transition to be an active member of the Army Reserve as I went back to my community. And what did I find when I joined the 423rd Military Police Company? 40% of that unit were New York City police officers. So this is the power of the Army Reserve. the networking and the connections. And they were able to help me navigate the process and get hired as a member of New York's finest. And I maintained communication with them throughout my career. And they helped me when I was a member of the New York City Housing Authority Police Department, working in some of the hardest hit developments in New York City in order to bring hope to them, in order to provide badly needed police services to make their environment safe. I also served as a member of patrol in both Brooklyn and in Manhattan as I rose up the ranks to sergeant and lieutenant. I was able to serve and had the opportunity to help police officers by serving in the NYPD's elite emergency services unit, as well as strategic response group, where I was responsible for managing large-scale events throughout New York City and balancing the rights of the citizens and just overall. I've had opportunities to protect the Pope when he visited New York City, and I've had opportunities to protect the president as part of his motorcade team when he was in New York City. And what I really took away from this whole thing is that the Army and the Army Reserve helped me develop those skills, those attributes, and those behaviors that allowed me to succeed in my good civilian occupation. And equally important is those skills that I learned in my civilian occupation contributed and helped both the Army and the Army Reserve. It's a win-win for both. So I want to thank my civilian employer, the NYPD, for sharing their talent with America's Army Reserve. And I want to thank all civilian employers everywhere for what they do to support our nation. It's incredibly important. So thank you.
Well, Sergeant Major, we join you in thanking our law enforcement officials. And I had the honor and privilege of visiting with the New York City Police Department on a few occasions when I was the Sergeant Major of the Army. And they're fine men and women who are very proud of their service, and as you equally demonstrated today. So thank you for serving as a soldier, and thank you for your service to your community back home in the great city of New York.
Thanks. I'm very proud of my service with them.
Yeah, and it shows, Sergeant Major, and you should be. Sergeant Major, so I have probably the most important question. This is my own personal question before we get into the questions that came in. I have to ask, since you're a lifelong New Yorker, where is the best place in New York City to get a piece of pizza?
Ha. Okay, I thought something like that was coming. So this is where my civilian occupation helps me answer this question, because all members of the NYPD are not just keeping the city safe, but we're ambassadors to the rest of the world when they come to visit our great city. And I know this. So we have we're a foodie town, and we have pizza places on every street corner, and they're all fantastic. So it's a tough question, but I think if you spent one day in New York City, you would have to go to the birthplace of pizza down in Little Italy on Mulberry Street and the corner of Spring Street. Well, you'll find something, probably the world's best pizza. And this is not a paid advertisement.
No,
it's a personal opinion. All right. And it's easy to remember because it's my name, and just take out the O and put an I. Lombardi's, the first where pizza was invented in New York City. All right, and what you're going to find when you go in there, it's unique because the rest of New York City serves pizza by the slice. You only get a full pie there. But you're going to be overwhelmed with the smell of the coal-fired oven dough and the crispiness of that dough. As well, it's got the purest tomato sauce and the freshest mozzarella with basil. Let me tell you, it's a pizza that you'll come back for. So I appreciate the question.
Oh, absolutely, Sergeant Major. I'll tell you what, I live in the Poconos. I'm going to go check the place out. Sergeant Major, I know that our audience is itching for us to get after some questions here. And the same question I asked John last week. It's been a tough year. The United States Army in its entirety has been through a lot, from all the things from the pandemic to wildfires, domestic disturbance. Can you give us a little bit about what the United States Army Reserve has been doing through this tough, challenging time?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. America's Army Reserve is a federal force, and COVID-19 is a microscopic monster that's been the scourge of our country. So when state and local authorities are overwhelmed, they often look toward the federal government, the Army, to provide assistance. And that includes America's Army Reserve. So let me tell you what we did. We were asked to and mobilized over 3,000 Army Reserve soldiers. And we were asked to get them in the places that were hardest hit fast. In fact, we were able to mobilize and move 2,800 soldiers within 72 hours to the areas most in need. FEMA asked us to create new structure that never existed before in the Army Reserve. They're called Urban Augmentation Medical Task Forces. So America's Army Reserve has a large amount of medical assets in our component. And one of the strengths of America's Army Reserve is that we exist in 50 states, 5 U.S. territories, and over 30 countries. So we were able to aggregate and create this force, these 85 soldier teams from areas that were less impacted, because we didn't want to take doctors, nurses, and critical care specialists out of the areas most affected, and aggregate them quickly and process them and get them to these hard-hit areas within 72 hours. Now, some of them worked at alternate medical care facilities, along with our partners in the Army, like the Jacob Javits Center. But others, and perhaps more importantly, went into existing local medical facilities and partnered with their doctors and their nurses in order to deliver aid where America most needed it. So we're talking Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Michigan, and Texas. General Lucky, the commander at the time, tells me a story where he went to visit his soldiers in one of the northeastern states. And as he's walking out, he was stopped by the hospital administrator. And the hospital administrator says, "Hey, listen, General, I just want to thank you for what your soldiers have done for us. It's not just what they did for the community, but our critical care nurses and our doctors were working 24-hour shifts, and we're at the breaking point. And we didn't know how, and we didn't know why. But when we saw your soldiers walking into our hospital, we knew we were going to be okay. And we knew with your help, we were going to get through this." And that's powerful. America's Army Reserve doesn't just provide critical skills, but we provide hope. And that's whether we're overseas or even at home helping the American people. And I'm really proud of what we've done. And we didn't just do that. We were working behind the scenes. We have logistical specialists and a theater support command, as well as an expeditionary support command, that were out there moving soldiers from all the services and medical supplies as part of DoD's response to the point of need. We had a command and control element, the 76th Operational Ready Command, who's managing the DoD's assets and response out in the western states. And then we have the unsung heroes. I didn't realize that in the Army Reserve, we have fixed-wing aircraft. And our leaders needed to get to and fro in order to make sure that and check on our soldiers and to make sure where we need to be. And those pilots flew our medical care personnel and key leaders, and they're still doing it today. Flew them all over the country where necessary in order to keep them safe in the time of need. And we still have 4 of these urban augmentation medical task forces prepared to deploy and respond if states need us. So I'm really happy about it, and I'm proud of their accomplishments in 2020.
Sergeant Major, it's a demonstration of the value of our Guard and Reserve forces and the incredible capability they bring to a nation, especially in times of crisis and domestic response. But they have another mission too, Sergeant Major, and there's some challenges I know that had to be faced with this year on maintaining readiness as part of the total force. Can you describe some of those challenges?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So we're part of the community, and we were also hit with the coronavirus disease as well. So we had to adapt, and we had to change the way we did business. And in some areas that were hardest hit, we couldn't bring our soldiers together. Our commanders and our leaders wanted to demonstrate that America's Army Reserve is a symbol of strength to the Army Reserve soldier and their family. So we changed the way we did business, and we leveraged the tools that we had available to us to allow soldiers to perform duty at remote locations distributively and get after the training requirements that they need to get. In those areas where some soldiers can go in person, they would go in person, and they would work in cohorts and bubbles, where other soldiers would come in through electronic means and take that training digitally. We called that hybrid battle assemblies. We also needed to demonstrate that we could still aggregate large forces where necessary to be able to do our primary mission, which is to support the Army to generate combat power. So we ran 2 exercises this summer, one in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and one in Fort Hunter Liggett, California. It's called Operation Ready Warrior. We were able to safely aggregate 1,000 soldiers at Fort McCoy, 900 at Fort Hunter Liggett, California. And through cohorts and bubbles and squad leader training, we were able to get after the Army warrior tasks as well as some collective tasks in order to demonstrate where we could safely get our force together and mobilize and project power if we need to. And that's a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of our force as a member of the total team. And we're proud to be a member of that team.
Well, we're proud that those soldiers are out there doing that great teamwork for us every day, Sergeant Major. You know, one thing that I thought was just phenomenal that the leadership made during this COVID crisis to take care of our soldiers and build that readiness was virtual drills. And I've participated in some of those as a leader mentor. Can you talk about the value of doing virtual drills and really the importance of why you had to make that decision?
Sure. Well, like I said, we wanted to demonstrate and we did not want to prevent, we need to get after readiness.
Mhm.
So there are some individual requirements that lend itself to distributed learning. Nothing replaces face-to-face interaction. But in times of need, we can get the crawl piece of training and we can do it distributively. In certain military occupational specialties, like military intelligence, for example, it actually enhances their ability to conduct their training because they operate at a distributive level anyway. Getting after some of the mandatory training requirements was huge. Don't need to have face-to-face interactions with it. And you know, at the squad level, to try to watch our soldiers do PRT together in a virtual environment and crowdsource the entire event, it's huge. It's amazing the ingenuity at the squad level. And I'm just incredibly impressed with the adaptability of our team.
And we say they spend too much time on their cell phones, Sergeant Major. That's right. Well, Sergeant Major, I think it's time we go out to our audience. And for our audience, please, just as a reminder, if you have a question for Sergeant Major, please go to your Q&A tab on the right-hand lower side and post your question. You can also vote on questions if that same question is already posted to move them up the category. And Sergeant Major, our first question is from John, and he'd like to hear your thoughts on what you see as the biggest challenges for the United States Army Reserve implementing the ACFT. Now, this question has come up for the Sergeant Major of the Army and the Sergeant Major of the Army National Guard, and it's obviously, and we knew it would come up today, Sergeant Major, because it's very important to the force. And how do you plan to overcome the challenges is what he's asking of ACFT.
No, thanks for the question. And so let me see if I can tackle it. So 792 facilities spread across 50 states. So the first challenge that we had to overcome was to distributing the equipment. And it's a testament to our leaders that we were absolutely able to accomplish that. And I'm pleased to report that every one of our facilities has the equipment. Now, as far as taking the test, so let me just be straight up. I experienced the challenges of the ACFT. Now, I've taken 2 diagnostics before the pandemic. And well, correction, I've taken 4, and I'm 2 for 2. So the event that I struggle with is a leg tuck. So here I am in March in New York City, working. The gyms are closed, and I know I'm about to go onto an active guard reserve tour as the 14th Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve. How am I going to get after training? And I'll tell you that you can prepare for the Army Combat Fitness Test without equipment. It takes a couple things. It takes adaptability, it takes commitment, and it takes a plan. So in New York City, I'm looking at the manual for the ACFT, and it shows how do you get after the leg tucks. And it shows a soldier doing a leg tuck on a tree branch. I'm like, I'm in New York City. There's no tree branches out here. What do I do? So I look at my environment. What's a tree branch in New York City? Building scaffolding. So here I am in New York City, and I'm hanging, getting ready, and practicing my leg tuck when I'm off duty. Adaptability. Commitment. You can't train for the ACFT like you train for the APFT. You're going to have to make a conscious effort to work out and prepare. And number 3, having a plan. So when I came on to regular Army as an active Guard Reserve soldier, I got with the members of my team. And you have those same resources in your unit. And those are master fitness trainers. So my executive NCO, Sergeant First Class Klein, prepared a program for me to help strengthen my abs and to do what I needed to do to successfully prepare for the ACFT. And I just took it last month. And I'm proud to just tell the audience that I was able to exceed the standard at the black level, which is not bad for an MP.
Well, Sergeant Major, thanks for sharing that story. But, I've seen a lot of stuff online. You read the rumors, is ACFT going to change? Is it here to stay? Is this program of record?
Yeah. No, thanks. So yes, the Army Combat Fitness Test is a test of record effective 1 October 2020. So what General Daniels and I are telling the members of the Army Reserve is take the test. Get the test and get the data into the system of record so we understand what that data is. And we can communicate to senior leaders if modifications need to be made. So the ACFT is non-punitive until at least 2022, but no punitive action is not an excuse not to train to pass the ACFT at the gold level for fiscal year 21.
Yeah, and ACFT, it is important, Sergeant Major, because fitness is a big important thing of what we do every day as soldiers. Sergeant Major, our next question is from Gina. And Gina asks, first of all, she says, thanks for the pizza recommendation. And can you provide an update on the FY21 recruiting retention? And will the United States Army Reserve meet its mission this year?
Okay, I appreciate the question. 2020 was a tough year for the Army Reserve, and we did not meet our end strength objective, and we missed it by 300. But what I do want to say is that our retention numbers for those that are in the Army Reserve exceeded our requirements by 134%. So that includes both first-time reenlistments as well as career reenlistments. And that also includes accessions from the individual ready reserve, both officers and enlisted soldiers. So what are we doing about this for fiscal year 2021? So I've gotten with the Officer Chief of the Army Reserve, and we've increased our mission requirements numbers. So what this is going to do is this is going to take a partnership with USAREC as well as HRC for the active component to reserve component transition program, as well as the members of my team and the Army Reserve Careers Group. And with that, we believe that we're going to meet the end strength objectives for fiscal year 2021.
That's good, Sergeant. And Sergeant Major, what advice would you give, a young civilian graduating out of high school, or even a soldier that's in active duty or the reserve now, about why they would join the Army Reserve?
Sure.
Or stay in the Army Reserve?
Sure. No, hey, I appreciate that question. So let's look at my example, and let's just talk about soldiers that are looking to pursue a civilian career from one of the regular components of the services. So after your first enlistment, you may have a spouse, you may have children, you may have a home. You may want to pursue that civilian career. The Army Reserve can give you those critical skills. We have 145 military occupational specialties that translate into good civilian jobs. And you can do both. You can continue to wear that uniform and to represent the nation, as well as using those skills to earn good civilian employment. The Army Reserve offers you an opportunity to continue the credit that you've earned towards retirement at age 60. It offers low-cost medical insurance, which is a little hard to get out in the civilian community. And it also allows you to continue your life insurance. Maybe most importantly, it gives you those connections and that networking ability, which have benefited me so much. We have 16 occupational specialties that also offer a $20,000 bonus for a specific commitment, which will help you transition if you don't have a job lined up when you get out. Now, for the Army Reserve soldiers, that are already serving with us, we want to keep you on the team. All right. And we're offering bonuses and incentives to do that. So I ask you to check your retention NCO. I also want to talk to the members of the other components as well. And maybe your career progression has peaked. One of the benefits of the Army Reserve is that you can get promoted into any vacancy that we have anywhere in the country. We'll pay you to travel there, and we'll also pay for your lodging as well. So that's one of the strengths that we offer as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my Army Reserve ambassadors, who are both retired military members and prominent members of the community that tell our story to the American public and advocate on our behalf. They have something else that's pretty cool out there as well. So let's say you want to get a piece of that opportunity and you want to become a leader in our force, you want to become a commissioned officer. The Army Reserve ambassadors offer Minuteman scholarships. So what is that? That's a full boat, 4-year college tuition payment to the college of your choice, and or $10,000 for room and board of your college at your choice. So you'll earn the Minuteman scholarship. You get to be an SMP cadet and reservist and get a supplemental income at the rank of sergeant. You get a monthly stipend and you get payment for books. So the bottom line is the America's Army Reserve offers a lot of opportunity for all of us, and we'd like you on our team.
Well, I appreciate that. And, your shout out to Reserve Ambassadors was very good. And my Reserve Ambassador for the state of Pennsylvania in my area is my former high school principal. And he's a colonel retired, does a phenomenal job. And I can tell you, he's an advocate of your Minuteman scholarship. And he's out there every day working hard to tell the community about the benefits of becoming an Army Reserve soldier, because there are many, like you described, Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, we're going to go back out, and I saw a question from a battle buddy out in, I think he's deployed right now, and he just says hi, and he wants to know, first of all, how you doing, but also, can you share your leadership philosophy? Now, you've been in the job since April, Sergeant Major. I know this because of COVID. It's a little bit tougher to do public appearances now, and maybe even challenge to get the word out. But so could you share for our listeners what your leadership philosophy is for United States Army Reserve?
Sure, absolutely. So as a New Yorker, my leadership philosophy is pretty simple. It's follow the golden rule and be fair. And I often go back to my squad leader, Sergeant Allen, right? So when I talk about the picnics, the barbecues on the weekends and getting that whole squad out there, all right? So what was he doing? He was building a cohesive team. When it came time to physical fitness, Sergeant Allen was out there with us, motivating us, getting us through that 3-mile run, right down there by Eisenhower Field at the military academy. All right, be physically fit. When it was time to practice and train for the Soldier of the Quarter Board and the Soldier of the Year Board, Sergeant Allen was out there making sure my uniform was squared away, making sure I could execute the proper facing movements, and making sure that I knew military knowledge, be disciplined. He also made sure that I saw that Army recruiter, the retention non-commissioned officer, that convinced me to continue service in the Army Reserve, be a soldier for life. So these are my basic philosophy, and it's carried me through 34 years. And it's all because of pretty much Sergeant Allen, and I'm real proud for the non-commissioned officers that made me who I am today.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, our next question is from Troy. And Troy asks, it's the same question that Sergeant Major Sampa got last week, is, because of COVID, there's been a lot of challenges. And one of those is getting our soldiers to the necessary schools they need to learn their critical skills, as you mentioned previously, but also so they can get promoted and advance. So what has the United States Army Reserve done to help, ease the burden on them because not being able to get out to schools like they have in the past?
Sure. So the Army Reserve has a core strength in that we actually have a training division that's responsible to conduct the advanced leader course, the senior leader course. And we also have on our Army Reserve funded installations, non-commissioned officer academies, which conduct the basic leader course. So how did the Army Reserve, as part of the TRADOC team, moved a lot of those courses to virtual courses for BLC and MLC. And we were able to, and what we did as an Army Reserve is we put those soldiers on orders in order to take those courses virtually in a distributed manner. ALC, we've been trying to convert a lot of those courses as well. But as you know, they're MOS specific and phased in our component. So it's been a bit of a challenge. So how do we work with that? Very similar to the way the Total Army handled it, and waived promotion, the school criteria for promotions for a limited period of time, not to penalize the soldier and to be able to give them the leadership opportunities that they deserve. So we waived promotion to staff sergeant and sergeant for first class for a period of time for those soldiers that would have scheduled their schooling during that period of time. And that's how we're getting after it, and we continue to get after it. And now we're just going to work on getting that backlog and get those soldiers into school to give them the proper institutional knowledge that they need to perform their jobs.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, our next question is from Marcus, and he says, can you speak on how Army requirements sometimes strain civilian-employer relationships and soldiers attending college full-time? It's a great job telling the United States Army Reserve story, by the way. So, and this is from, looks like Sergeant Major Fisher.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Sergeant Major Marcus. I appreciate that. So yes, so that's a tough question. Of course, coming from Sergeant Major Fisher. So I think that's a tough question for any leaders. So how do we get after the strain? And I would say the way we're doing it in the Army Reserve is through commander priorities. So as you know, with the total force, we have a shift in our priorities, and people are our number one priority. You know, the active component, the regular Army, talks about the golden diamond, yes? With the soldier in the center, the battle buddy, the family, and the squad leader. In the Army Reserve, I like to talk about the golden diamond. It includes that civilian employer. That civilian employer is central to that Army Reserve soldier's life. It provides the bedrock and the sustainment that enables that soldier to take care of his family. So with that priority of people first, General Daniels and I are pushing predictability and consistency in training dates so that soldier can notify his civilian employer or her civilian employer, and they know in advance when our training requirements are. And we believe with that, we'll get after taking care of being relevant and ready, but not so relevant and ready that that our soldiers can't maintain good civilian employment.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. And Sergeant Major, next question is from, and excuse me if I mispronounce your name, is Waldemar. It says, Sergeant Major, what information you wish you knew or had now that you are at the Sergeant Major of the United States Army Reserve, so at the top, that you wish you knew or had when you were down at the company level?
I love hypothetical questions because it gives me the opportunity to give a hypothetical answer. What I wish I knew when I was at the company level is the entire picture of what the components working together bring to our nation. And it's that synergy and the teamwork that the National Guard, the Army Reserve, and the regular Army bring together that make us the most powerful land force in the world. Mentorship, obviously. You know, having that operational level knowledge of what's out there and strategic level knowledge of why we're doing what we're doing is hugely important. And that's why it's important for leadership to communicate that down to the company level, so we understand the commander's intent and we're all rowing in the same direction. And that's what's important to me to have, you know, at company level.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that answer, Sergeant Major. And our next question, Sergeant Major, is from Tony. And Tony asks, what are the training challenges, and this is pretty specific, Sergeant Major, that the United States Army Reserve has at getting after the new Army qualifications within TC 3-20.40? And how are you getting after the simulation and live fire tables, especially in the current pandemic and crisis we have now?
Yeah, well, great. Not going to make it easy for me. So the Army Reserve is fully engaged through our 6 Army Reserve funded installations. And I could say with certainty that we are actually transferred the ranges to the new TAC 40 standards. So I'm real proud of that. We're training soldiers delivering the SIM devices out to camps, posts, and stations so they can get at the appropriate tables to be successful on the ranges. And it's going to take some time. I was out there for the Best Warrior contest, and I was shooting with the C cup on the barriers, and this was with an unzeroed rifle, and maybe I knocked 23, so I qualified marksman. I think our junior non-commissioned officers, whether it's distributively or in person, understand the task that's required of them, and they're the ones that need to deliver this training to our soldiers. And it's going to take some time, but we're going to get there, and we're going to be proficient in our weapon systems.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, our next question is from Franklin, and he says, in layman's terms, how would you describe the Army Reserve as it compares to the active component and the National Guard?
Okay. No, thank you very much. So the first thing I'm going to say is we're a team. So let me give you an analogy. All right. Let's say we're a football team, and every football team has an offense. Every football team has a defense, and every football team has special teams. Now, football teams don't win because of the quarterback or the receiver alone, and they don't win because of a strong defensive line. And they don't win because of special teams. But in order to win, you do need those special teams. And I kind of liken the Army Reserve as part of those special teams. You need that punter to kick that ball downrange. You need the receiver to bring the ball uprange to put that offense in a better position. And that's what the Army Reserve brings to the total team. We're those special teams. Since we're talking about teams and we're talking about football, I want to just take a quick break. And if I could just give a shout out, SMA.
Absolutely, yeah.
Go Army!
Beat Navy.
Huh. So let me just give you an example of some of the critical capabilities that we provide. And I mentioned this earlier, doctors. These are critical capabilities, and they're civilian jobs that are in high demand, and they're hard and expensive to maintain on active duty. We have other critical capabilities: civil affairs, military intelligence, theater level assets that are very expensive to maintain on active duty for theater engineer commands, military police commands. And this is what we bring to the team in order to be able to make or give those capabilities and units to the Army in order for it to be expeditionary and to be a campaign capable force.
Sergeant Major, you mentioned earlier how critical of a role the United States Army Reserve has played in the medical response to the current pandemic. And John's question is in direct regards to that. And he says, is the United States Army involved in the distribution of the COVID vaccine? And if so, how?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. So are we involved? What I could tell you and what I point out is we actually do have 7 members of the Army Reserve that are down in the CDC, and I believe it's in Atlanta, Georgia, and they're working very hard to be able to distribute or to coordinate the distribution. And I don't know the specifics of what we're doing, but I'm absolutely proud to have representation of America's Army Reserve in that fight to get this vaccine to the American people.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. Yeah. Dan E. asked, Sergeant Major, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. And he asked, could you share your view on what you see as future challenges to the non-commissioned officers of the U.S. Army Reserve?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So the future challenge for us is to implement This Is My Squad into a citizen soldier force. And what does that look like? And how do we operationalize that non-commissioned officer? And to me, I want to digitalize that non-commissioned officer. I want that non-commissioned officer to be able to get on the Army Training Network, to be able to get on the Small Unit Leader tool, to be able to use the digital job book, to be able to have those tough conversations with their team in order to make sure that we are that cohesive team and that we are able to generate that combat power. So I think those tough talks we need to have. We need to understand our soldiers, what motivates them, and have them tell their story like you did to me earlier in this session today. How do we get after promotions in a distributive environment? Do we need to take a look at doing promotion boards at the junior level in order to implement "This is my squad" questions. That's something I want to take a look at and see if that's an area that we need to make a change in the Army Reserve.
Absolutely.
So thanks for the question.
Sergeant Major, I think we have time for one more. And actually, the next question up is a perfect question to close out today's noon report. And they asked, Sergeant Major, where can we go to get more information about the Army Reserves?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. So if I could just say, the Army Reserve is ready. The Army Reserve is relevant. And the Army Reserve is part of the total force. And I'm absolutely proud to represent the Army Reserve. We're looking for the brightest and the best talent to help us meet the challenges of the future. If you're a service-minded individual or you're transitioning from one of the Army components, we'd love to have you on the team if you want to give back to the nation. If you want to check us out, you can learn more at usar.army.mil.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. And we appreciate you coming on the show today and giving us sharing your story and sharing the information about the United States Army Reserve and the proud work that our soldiers are doing out there every single day and will continue to do in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, before we transition today, I'd like to just go over a couple of future events that we have here going on at AUSA. And tomorrow, 10 December, AUSA's Thought Leaders at 1000 Eastern Standard Time on the Medal of Honor Graphic Novel Roundtable, which covers the graphic novel series that you can access at ausa.org. On 5 January, AUSA Thought Leaders at 1000 Eastern again. Breaching the Summit, Leadership Lessons from the U.S. Military's Best. We'll hear from senior enlisted military leaders about their experiences and the book they wrote. And then on 12 January, the 16th Sergeant Major of the Army will join us for the AUSA Noon Report, wrapping up our year in review series and also giving us some insights on what's in store for 2021. To register for these and all AUSA events, please visit the AUSA website. Also, ladies and gentlemen, mark your calendars for Global Force Next, 16 through 18 March 2021, and be on the lookout for information on how to register in the near future. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank everyone who is a member of the Association of the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, membership matters. It helps support our soldiers, our veterans, our communities, and it helps put together programs like you saw today. If you want to learn how to be a member or the many benefits of membership, please visit ausa.org. And lastly, Sergeant Major, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your incredible service as both a soldier and a member of the finest in New York City as a police officer.
Thank you for the opportunity, SMA, and I'll just leave by saying I am a lifelong member of AUSA. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.